Hello, friends. Welcome to Pioneers and Changemakers. My name is Ranjit Kanapu, and I'm a co-founder of Be Waste Wise. And the reason we started Pioneers and Changemakers is, the reason we started Be Waste Wise was because there were billions of people. There are billions of people looking for solutions, but only a few thousand, tens of thousands of people who have expertise in providing those solutions or in guiding towards those solutions. So there's immense knowledge, but it's not really accessible to these billions who are looking for solutions. And we have the global dialogue on this, which will cover that part. But then recently, it's just been coming back to us that the scale of the challenges we face today are planetary, and our future is uncertain, and we need to do a lot of work to ensure a better life on our planet. But I keep meeting people who are bogged down by these challenges, the immensity of these challenges, and the negativity in today's media. And I myself often feel helpless. So I've decided to stop being angry and then turn my gaze towards change makers who are consistently chipping away at our problems, slowly but consistently. They're just moving ahead in one direction, which is solving these problems. So we started this series, and um, we'll have 30-minute conversations every Wednesday starting today. And today we'll start it with Robert Egger, who's the founder of LA Kitchen, and he's also done a lot of other work. Today we'll talk about his work in waste management, but also his work in nonprofit management. And join us in asking questions to Robert, and use the chat box below to ask your questions. With this, I'd like to get Robert on the screen. And hi, Robert, how are you?
Good, man.
Wonderful.
Here we are in the LA Kitchen.
Yeah, the LA Kitchen, that's your background. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Well, I'm actually waiting for the day to begin. We do a variety of things that are kind of, in my way of thinking, very, very connected to what you are interested in. I think what the audience is interested in, which is, how do we not only avoid waste, but how do we use it differently? Now, I got started almost 30 years ago, picking up food from restaurants, hotels, hospitals, universities, and ultimately farmers. Now, traditionally, people went out on the streets and fed people who were standing in line. I did that once as a volunteer, well-intended. But I was really, I left there thinking, man, they're buying food to feed people who, the night I went out, were standing outside in the rain in Washington, D.C. Literally, I was up in a warm truck serving people. And so I went home that night and thought, man, restaurants are throwing away food. Why don't somebody go collect that, right? And bring it back to a central kitchen where you can feed more people better food for less money. But hey, man, why don't you offer men and women a chance to come out of the rain and be part of the solution, and start a cooking school for men and women who might be homeless or addicts or out of prison. Now I was, and again, as I think many of your generation, and probably people online know all too well, oftentimes people who want to propose change are rebuffed. And I was told by everybody that my idea would never work, that restaurants wouldn't donate food, it was illegal, which it was not, or that homeless people couldn't work, which was, I felt, shocking that people would think that, let alone say it out loud. So 30 years later, here I am in really a 20,000 square foot kitchen facility that brings in cosmetically imperfect fruits and vegetables, thousands of pounds a day, which is used to fuel a culinary arts job training program, 15 weeks long, where men and women who are either aging out of foster care, who are kind of on their way out to the streets or prison, are being guided away from that road by the other half of the training program, which are older men and women who are coming home. So it's an intergenerational approach. While they're learning, they process meals kind of random donations into balanced meals, which are then delivered to agencies that quite honestly share our sense of purpose, that we don't want to just give away free food. I view food as an incredibly precious, and as hard as it might seem, given the numbers we associate with food waste, waste is not forever. Food waste is lost profit. So we're trying to not only develop really cool, replicable systems, but challenge people to think differently about the way we use things that are wasted. It's cool to pick up food and feed somebody, but I want to liberate people.
Right, right. No, I think that's great. What you're doing is great, and we were really excited when we know that you'd be the first speaker to
Yeah,
start
me too,
the
dude.
Pioneers.
Me too.
Thank you very much, Robert. And well, what's taking most of your time? I mean, you're working in LA Kitchen now, but I know you also do a whole lot of other stuff. So even in LA, within LA Kitchen, what kind of tasks take most of your time?
Well, I practice two things that very much play into your earliest comment about, how do you make change, right? Particularly when it seems so daunting. I practice a little tradition I call relentless incrementalism. The idea of relentless small steps. Sometimes we get bogged down thinking that change is big, it's monumental, it's cataclysmic, it happens all at once, versus the slow drip of water that slowly erodes the rock. So in my older age, I think I've become a little bit more understanding, but my patience hasn't changed. I'm still relentless. But again, I understand that what I need to do is come in here every single day and make big things happen, right? Now, secondly, though, is I do 49-51. 49% of my time is here, LA Kitchen. I'm a big believer. I love what I do. Yesterday was the class, the beginning of class 13, our 13th class here. Today we'll do probably 2,000-3,000 really beautiful plant-based meals made out of donated food. There's so many things I love about my work here, but I only, and this is a metaphor, allow 49% of my energy to be here. 51 must be conversations like this. What is LA Kitchen part of? What am I lending any visibility I have? And this is a big discussion for, I think, people in our business and NGO leaders in general. I mean, when the media or anybody comes to your door, can you only talk about what you do, or will you try and absorb enough light to sustain yourself, but deflecting light on other metaphorical plants growing that don't get the light you might? So again, that 49% is talking collectively. How do we talk, globally about waste? I'm open source, for example. I have always been really fiercely committed to that idea of whatever I have, I will share freely and openly, so that people can come behind me and take any part of what I've created and use it the way they see fit.
And before we get into before we leave the topic of waste for a while, could you also talk about how other cities in the US, or maybe cities outside the US, could replicate what you're doing? Or if not cities, then how other people who are, as committed and passionate about as you could begin something like this, or, could replicate the kind of work that you're doing?
I came up at a time when there was a lot of interest, particularly from the foundation world, on models that could be replicated. And I would watch really cool models, and I'd see them get a lot of money. It's like they're never, there's too many moving pieces there. So from a very early start, I was fiercely focused on this idea of what exists everywhere. What can I use in my city? So to a certain extent, I am the metaphorical miner for a heart of gold here. I mean, it's like that sense of what's right at our feet. What are those things that exist that we almost have that eyes wide shut? We see them day after day, but we see them in this box. For example, a lot of the stuff I work with are things that our society views are as part of the problem. So food waste, right? We throw away 40% of the food we produce, half of it's fruits and vegetables. We view that as bad, right? I look at addicts, people who are homeless, people out of prison. I look at older people. I look at kitchens that are underutilized. These are all assets, in my opinion, and they exist everywhere. So rather than the LA Kitchen being what I think is replicable, it is the system in which LA Kitchen plays a role. Now, this is the first kitchen I've ever built. In almost 30 years, I've always used existing facilities, whether it's the DC Kitchen, which was a program I started in 1989, that has been, I won't say replicated, but again, it's a model that people have taken to heart and made their own, right? So there's about 50 some cities that have done a variation of that theme of take food that would have been thrown away, train people for jobs, produce beautiful meals, right? But then we started a thing called campus kitchens. And the idea was your generation, man, there's 100 million people under 30 in America, the most diverse generation in the history of our country, raised doing service. What a tremendous resource when you think about it, right? Yet we still say you must leave your school and come to me, the NGO, so you can get your service. I was driving through rural Indiana, a little state in the middle of America, and noticed an empty school in the afternoon, a brand new high school that had been built in the rural town where my parents lived, and thought, wow, man, they got a cafeteria in there and a kitchen that's closed all afternoon, all night, all weekend. It's closed more than it's open.
Yeah.
And it's surrounded by a generation of kids who want service. There's a field out back that could be a garden. Not only could it be a garden, but it could be an intergenerational garden where young and old come together. And there's 72 of those programs now. So again, very, very focused on that constant sense of observing constantly wherever I am, that what's out there that I can use differently. So LA Kitchen is similar. This time I'm just focusing on this issue of aging, which is global, and it is going to be a profound issue, both socially, economically, politically, and environmentally, that must be addressed.
And you wanted to discuss about aging, which I think is extremely, just the issue of demographics is extremely important for us to discuss. But before we get into that, maybe if I can summarize what you're saying is you look for things or items which are generally perceived as valueless, and then you try to find value or try to find systems. And you're also you're also saying that instead of just focusing on what someone's doing, it's also important to understand how someone's looking at the problem and why they're taking that certain path that they took.
Right.
And this is something that we've been doing at Be Waste Wise for a while. Focusing on not just what, because we're looking at global solutions and we understand that it can't be replicated everywhere. But just trying to understand, what these change makers are trying, not what, but how and why these change makers. So again, thanks for mentioning that. And so since we were talking about value, lack of value, so maybe I could get you to the next question, which is, we are a nonprofit. Be Waste is a nonprofit, and the kind of work that we do has incredible societal value. Like it's like bringing up a child without expecting the child to pay you every day for bringing him or her up. And what you're doing at LA Kitchen, I mean, it has such incredible societal value. But it's not valued in terms of GDP right now.
Right.
And therefore, the financing for nonprofits is also kind of related to that. So do you want to talk about this issue of the value that's provided by nonprofits? And
yeah, boy, do I. I worked really hard as a young man. My first reaction, and the reason I built the DC Kitchen, was almost a response to charity, which is historic. It's common of all faiths. Yet sometimes it's stuck in this idea of I'm going to serve the poor, us and them. And I just thought that was a waste of think about it, how much money, $360 billion a year is donated to nonprofit organizations in the United States. We have 4 trillion in assets, 14 million employees, 70 million volunteers. And you can't make profit without nonprofits. And I think that's a very, very important and economic fact. In other words, without, at least in the US, but I think in many countries, without arts and culture, communities of faith, and in the United States, healthcare, education, clean air, clean water, so many of the things that are the domain of the nonprofit sector, yet we're not viewed. You never, in fact, in my lifetime, I have never heard one presidential candidate talk about the role of nonprofits, and particularly when you think about the global economy and the idea of rebuilding. So LA Kitchen is a social enterprise. In other words, we have a nonprofit organization that gets donated fruits and vegetables, trains men and women for jobs, engages volunteers, provides beautiful meals. We also have a for-profit company that employs men and women out of prison, starting people at $13.50 an hour with full benefits, produces beautiful, healthy meals, and then reinvests profit. Now, if I'm the mayor of a town and you're telling me there's a business model that by their very nature is open to paying a good wage, practicing really, kind of dedicated to green principles, and reinvest profit back in the community. If I'm a mayor, I want more of those. Yet we have not been able to escape, if you will, not unlike the things I suggested earlier that we as a society view as part of the problem, or things that don't have much value. Sadly, I believe NGOs often fall into that same category. So to your point, man, I spent a long time trying to prove the value of what I was doing specifically in our kitchens. This idea of, look at all this stuff we're doing here. Yet I was shocked how rarely would a mayor go beyond, oh, Robert, man, you're a saint. You feed the poor. You know,
Mhm.
what will we do without you? And it's like, you know, no one would stop and say, wow, dude, you brought, like LA Kitchen, man, I brought probably $5 million into LA from outside LA. You know,
Mhm.
I'm creating jobs for men and women who would either end up on the street or end up back in prison. So, for example, every year we graduate about 80 men and women from our job training program, right? Now, those men and women will go on to earn over $2 million in salaries every year. They
Mhm.
will pay $200,000 in payroll taxes every year versus going back to prison and costing us collectively $50,000 to $70,000 per year to sit in prison. So I've always been intrigued, for example, if you had given Bill Gates $1,000 in 1986 when Microsoft went public, you'd have $1.4 million in the bank. That's the last time I did the math on that. But if you had given Muhammad Yunus, who founded the
Yeah.
Green Bank, that has elevated conservatively 100 million people, 70 million people out of poverty with small loans, all you would have been eligible for was a one-time tax deduction because he was an NGO.
Mhm.
So I'm intrigued. Why don't we figure out how to invest in nonprofits and create a return on investment formula that would take the same idea as a dividend, but again, the idea of an expanding tax credit if a nonprofit can show verifiable economic impact? What a potential blossoming of our
Mhm.
sector. If people, imagine for your generation, if you could invest in your community through NGOs, make your community stronger, cleaner, more just, and actually attain wealth through that investment. To me, that is not only a waste of not seeing the role of nonprofits, but a waste of our taxes to consistently give opportunities to .com businesses, charities.
Right, right. Now, thank you for that. Now, moving on to since we have only 30 minutes, I'm quickly moving through
I hate
topics.
it.
Yeah, but so you wanted to talk about ageism and demographics. So please go ahead.
Well, you know, it's funny, man. You know, I always tend to be an amateur futurist, you know, and it's just based on probability. So, for example, germane to our conversation, women outlive men, women outnumber men. Fast forward, the majority of old people will be women. That's, you know, probability and demographics. But I wasn't really hip to that. I mean, but in the early 2000s, two things really became fascinating to me. That as much as we bemoan the amount of food waste globally, and particularly here in the United States, where we have a tremendous waste culture, nonetheless, all that represents lost profit. And so the food bank, the charitable sector in America relies on a steady stream of donated product. What myself and others were saying for many years is, you know, that's going to go away. And if we're just feeding the poor every day after day and not reducing the number of people who are poor, we're going to wake up one day and that food will be gone. As crazy and far-fetched as that sounds, it's coming. You know, when I was young, I could go to restaurants every day and pick up tons of food. I watched as the restaurant industry, the hotels, the caterers got more and more sophisticated. So I started to focus on fruits and vegetables because that still remains the thing that's the easiest to get. Now it demands, in my opinion at least, kitchens like this to value add, to chop, dice, puree, juice, zest, dehydrate, anything to avoid it just going rotten somewhere down the stream after I take credit for redistributing it. But I
Mhm.
became fascinated on who's poor in America and who's next. And that's also semi-predictable.
Mhm.
And I became aware now in the United States, I know there's people from other countries, but there's the system called Meals on Wheels, which is how we feed elders, right? And it's based on the idea of someone's going to take a kitchen like this and create meals, and people will drive their cars and knock on a door and visit with an older person. That was the original intent. The numbers were going exponentially. That I discovered it was revealed to me that there was a waiting list in half of American cities 4 years before demographically the first of my generation, the baby boomers, 70 million plus, started to turn 60.
Mhm.
And it was like alarm bells went on my head because supply, the food was reducing and the demand was like this. And the people who were going to be hungry in the future probably weren't as able to get to the distribution system we had, which was developed to feed able-bodied unemployed people in the 1960s and 70s. If you're a working woman, you know, has one or two jobs with kids, or an older person, you need a different kind of system, a different kind of meal. But that aging thing, dude, that really struck me because, you know, every single morning in America, 10,000 people turn 70 every day. And that's going to go on for 18 years. And there's no plan, none. And I don't like to trade in dire predictions. But if you look at the demographics and the savings patterns, we've been told to not save, but to waste. For all intents and purposes, buy something, buy more, buy more. We live to consume. So what you have of all workers in America between 45 and 60, half don't have $10,000 set aside for their retirement. Right. So I look out there and think, wow, this is an issue that must be addressed. So that 49% of my time is here figuring out, how do I feed more people better food for less meals? How do I include ethnically diverse meals? Food is medicine. But to your point, man, is ageism itself. How do we value our elders? This is a global phenomenon that has never, ever happened. This many people living as long as they will. And no society is really prepared to meet the need in the traditional charitable response. So I became fascinated by this sense of, how do you rebuild community and that sense of connection between family, neighbors. And I happen to use food because at least in the United States, food is people come to it. I mean, it's funny. We had this whole food in America. It is, dude. But what's funny is I don't think people get that it's not food, I think, that people are coming for. It's community. Right. People are longing globally. So I think many of us in the waste movement or the people who particularly do food and waste sometimes don't know what we have. And what we have is an army of people who want to be engaged in something bigger and more powerful. Right. And I think if we can sometimes guide them with food and then help them take this small leap to this bigger, more profound issue of not wasting people too. So that's our bag, man. Wrinkled food, wrinkled people, no waste.
Yeah. And people are one of the few renewable resources we have.
Yeah, and think about it, man. The boomers, at least the baby boomers in this country, or older people in just about anywhere you go, are in many cases the most educated generation in the history of the world. I mean, it's the deepest well of knowledge ever in the history of the world. So there's a sense on shame on us if we can't prove that out.
And Robert, so quickly moving on to the next question. So you're doing this, and you've also done a DC Central Kitchen, which congratulations, has its 29th anniversary this week.
Yeah. I don't know if that's a good thing, but keep going.
So you're doing this. So what's the end game look like? Like, if you stretch it out, if you stretch this initiative out, like, what does the end game look like to you? And what kind of role do you think you're playing? Where do you fit in all of this?
Well, I tend to be a proof of concept man. I mean, I can't fix a problem. It's much bigger than me. So the only thing I can do is reveal the power that exists within most communities and a new way to look at it. So for me, the long range is, people who use food, whether it's food banks, pantries, the idea of just giving away free food, as historic as that is, and as just as it always is to make sure another human is fed, we must look beyond that. How do you squeeze every ounce of empowerment out of every morsel of food you have? That's number one. Secondly, I'm really interested in food and medicine, and the idea that, for example, I can produce healthy meals because they're more plant-based. But if I can partner with a younger generation of food nutritionists, young doctors, if I can start to partner with them to create really medically specific formulas, juices, broths that I can use for an addict or an older person to really strengthen them so they can be more participatory in our society, that's cool. I definitely believe that social enterprise has a powerful role to play. Part of what I wanted to do, we're co-located in a building with 50 other kitchens. It's the biggest food incubator space currently in America. And I was interested in co-locating for one big reason. I knew every mayor in America wants a food hub or a food incubator, but they don't know what it can do. I was hoping that they would come by, and through the tours they're taking, and literally weekly, we have people from cities come, they will see our model and stop and say, whoa, wow, this is amazing. They're taking food that would have been thrown away, training people for jobs, engaging volunteers, and going back to older people, one of the top level economic realities is that an older generation must live independently and stay productive as long as humanly possible. So meaningful volunteerism, that sense of I made something happen, I'm part of something bigger, I feel alive again. That's a big part of what we do. But if they could see this idea of the LA Kitchen, our model originally was we wanted to contract with the city to prepare meals for older people. And if we could get mayors all across America to stop and say, I never thought of our city contracts, whether it's waste hauling, whether it's feeding people, whether it's a wide variety of other things. I never thought about being able to contract with a business, with a generation of young entrepreneurs like yourself, who are saying, wow, I want to start a business that not only doesn't do harm, it does good. I want to start a business that makes me feel like my philanthropy is where I go to work every day, not the check I write at the end of the year.
Right.
So you need a generation of mayors who see what a waste that they have this giant nonprofit system, a generation of older people, a fiery generation of young believers. And so to my way of thinking, one of my great end goals is a generation of mayors who look out at their city and see not troubled times, even though the times are tough, but this sense of, I have nothing to lose by trying something radically different. So almost putting out a call from City Hall saying, if you're a young person and you've got an idea, I don't care how crazy your friends think it is. I want to hear it. You know, and if I can help fund it, if it's going to keep money local, if it's going to keep people off the street, if it's going to engage elder people, reduce waste, I am all ears. Come down to City Hall.
So, so your end game is changing how city decision makers are looking at business and nonprofits within their regions. That's wonderful. And you want to act as the proof of concept guy who can show that this actually works.
Well,
so
and again,
awesome.
as we said earlier, though, while I'm proving concept, it's anybody can come and see what I do and take it to their town, because it works in any town, because everything I use exists in every town.
Yeah, wonderful. And before I ask you about your biggest challenge and how you solved it, you know, we'll not have much time. We just have 3 minutes. But before I do that, friends, so thank you again for joining us today. And this is in this series, we'll have 30-minute conversations every week with pioneers and change makers. And next week, it'll be Adam Reed from Suez, UK. He's been a long-time contributor of Be Waste Wise, and it'll be great hearing from him again. And I think we'll probably and definitely talk about the ban on recyclables, the China's import ban on recyclables. So tune in next week for a conversation with Adam Reed. And you'll have to register to watch these panels and interact with the speakers. So please do that too. So Robert, back to you. So what has been, you know, one of your biggest challenges, and how did you overcome, or, you know, why did you do certain things?
Well, currently, the biggest issue for me is trying to get people to understand the issue of aging. That this is so global and profound. I mean, the economics of this and the social aspect. You know, so there's that element of trying to get particularly elected people to see that this is a profound issue that must be addressed, that we should march out to meet the future, not wait for it to come to us. That's one thing. And of course, I'm wildly interested, as you well know now, this idea of the role of nonprofits in America. So, you know, I think like many entrepreneurs, you're never satisfied. There's never a sense of I'm done. I think one of the biggest things is sometimes it can appear daunting. You know, I think for any of us, no matter how far you go, it is a daunting task to care. You know, many people think caring is a sucker's bet. You know, there's no long-term value in it, you know. And frankly, for a younger generation, you know, whether it's your parents or your peers, many people will say, follow my route. You know, go out and make money and then give some back near the end of your life. You know, it's that Carnegie Rockefeller concept of make money by any means necessary, and then near the end of your life, give some back trying to offset the damage you did. You know, I think one of the greatest waste is to try and tell a younger generation to make the same mistake we did. You know, in other words, attain wealth and redistribute it, versus try and build business or a lifestyle in which every single day you go out there practicing that sense of relentless incrementalism. I'm going to, through my life, through my business, through my work, or through my being, try in any small way I can to make the world a better place.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Robert. It was great having you. And I hope you'll stay connected with Be Waste.
Oh, dude, man, we're twins of different mothers now, man. We're connected for life.
All right, great, wonderful. Great, wonderful. Thanks, Robert. Thank you again. And
well, thanks to everybody who got up to hear us today.
Great. Yeah, and by the way, it's 6:30 a.m. Well, it should be 7 a.m. now, and Robert got really early to LA Kitchen for this interview. So thanks again. And friends, with this, goodbye. Join us next week for interview with Adam Reed. So thank you very much.